The moment Eva saw the ultrasound results, the world around her shattered like glass under a hammer. Every heartbeat pounded with disbelief, each pulse a drum of betrayal she could no longer ignore. The child she carried was not just hers, it was the product of a secret Tomas had buried deep, a truth he never dared reveal. Anger ignited in her chest, scorching and uncontrollable, spreading to every nerve, every thought, every instinct. In one swift motion, her phone hit the floor with a sharp crack, echoing the fracture of everything she had believed about love, trust, and the life they had built together. Her hands trembled, her lungs burned, and for the first time, Eva understood that the man she thought she knew was a stranger hiding behind lies. The revelation wasn't just a secret, it was a weapon, aimed straight at the heart of their relationship, and it had struck with lethal precision. Eva stood frozen in the stark, fluorescent-lit room, her eyes locked on the ultrasound screen, yet seeing far beyond the grainy black and white image it displayed. The figure flickering before her was not merely an unborn child, it was the living embodiment of a secret Tomas had buried deep within the folds of their shared past. The realization struck her with the force of a hurricane, a relentless surge of betrayal that made her entire body tremble. Every moment she had trusted him, every word they had shared, suddenly felt hollow, like the remnants of a life she thought she knew but had never truly understood. The weight of anger and disbelief coiled tightly within her chest, igniting a firestorm she could no longer contain. Her phone, clenched tightly in her hand, became the instrument of her catharsis. With a sudden, explosive gesture, she hurled it to the floor, the sharp crash reverberating through the room like the jagged fragments of her shattered trust. The act was instinctive, an eruption of emotions she had long suppressed. Rage, sorrow, and an all-consuming fear of the unknown. In that moment, she realized the depth of Tomas's deception. This was not a mere omission or a trivial lie. This was a calculated concealment that now threatened to obliterate the foundation of their love. Tomas stood silently, frozen in the aftermath of her outburst. His own heart pounded not in triumph but in terror. He had hoped, perhaps naively, that his secrets could remain dormant, contained within the recesses of memory and guilt. Now, confronted with the tangible manifestation of his hidden truth, he felt an oppressive weight pressing down on him, threatening to crush the very air from his lungs. He longed to speak, to offer explanations that might bridge the widening chasm between them, but words seemed insufficient, inadequate against the tidal wave of Eva's fury. Days passed with Eva withdrawing from Tomas, each moment of absence amplifying the gnawing uncertainty that plagued both of them. Tomas was left alone with his reflection, confronting the consequences of his choices in a stark, unforgiving clarity. Every memory, every decision that had contributed to the concealment of this secret, now revealed itself in painfully sharp relief. Regret became his constant companion, pressing him to consider the impossible. How could he rebuild what he had destroyed? How could he reach across the gulf of betrayal to reclaim Eva's trust? Meanwhile, Eva navigated her own storm. Her thoughts were a battleground of conflicting emotions. Anger and heartbreak clashed with a lingering, stubborn spark of attachment. Each day, she wrestled with the urge to sever ties completely and the hesitant desire to preserve what remained of their love. The revelation had shattered the illusion of security, leaving her suspended in a liminal space between fury and sorrow, self-preservation and vulnerability. She questioned the authenticity of every tender moment they had shared, wondering if the intimacy she once cherished had ever been genuine, or merely a facade Tomas had meticulously maintained. The consequences of the ultrasound revelation extended beyond the private sphere of their relationship. Friends, family, and colleagues became unwitting witnesses to the tension that now permeated their interactions. The subtle shifts in demeanor, the restrained glances, and the whispered speculations created an atmosphere thick with scrutiny and expectation. Eva's solitude became more pronounced, the social and emotional ramifications of Tomas's secret intensifying the pressure she felt. Tomas, for his part, was thrust into a crucible of accountability, forced to confront not only Eva's disillusionment but the judgment of those around them, all of whom had invested their own hopes and perceptions into the narrative he had so carefully curated. As Tomas sought avenues to repair the damage, he recognized that transparency alone would not suffice. Every attempt at reconciliation carried inherent risks, every word of confession, every gesture of remorse, was fraught with the possibility of deepening the rupture. He was acutely aware that missteps could irreparably fracture the fragile bridge he was attempting to construct. The burden of restoration weighed heavily upon him, compelling a meticulous, almost surgical approach to rebuilding trust, knowing that even minor miscalculations could trigger a final, irrevocable separation. For Eva, the act of forgiveness became a labyrinthine challenge. It was no longer a simple choice but a profound test of resilience and moral courage. The struggle was as much with herself as it was with Tomas, a contest between the instinct to protect her own heart and the yearning to honor the remnants of a love that had once defined her existence. Each recollection of their past together was tainted with suspicion. The line between genuine affection and carefully constructed deceit blurred to the point of near indistinguishability. The public dimension of the secret, once it began to leak through accidental revelations or subtle hints, compounded the intensity of the situation. Social scrutiny and the weight of expectation created additional layers of tension, further destabilizing Eva's emotional equilibrium. Tomas confronted not only the personal consequences of his concealment but the broader implications of his actions, aware that his every decision would be observed, evaluated, and potentially judged by a wider audience. In this crucible of emotion and consequence, the couple's dynamic became a volatile interplay of desperation, hope, and the relentless pressure of circumstances beyond their control. Every step toward potential reconciliation was fraught with peril. The delicate equilibrium required to navigate the minefield of betrayal demanded more than courage, it demanded insight, empathy, and an almost painful attunement to the subtleties of emotional response. Miscalculation could trigger not just anger, but a complete collapse of the tentative framework holding their relationship together. Conversely, an act of genuine understanding, a willingness to confront discomfort, and a display of consistent, tangible accountability could begin to reweave the fractured bonds. In this tense interlude, both Eva and Tomas became warriors in an intimate, psychological battlefield. The stakes were nothing less than the preservation of their emotional lives, the survival of a bond tested beyond ordinary limits. Every thought, every hesitation, every decision carried immense weight. In confronting betrayal and navigating the potential for forgiveness, they grappled with the fundamental question: could love endure in the shadow of secrets, or would the cumulative force of deception irrevocably sever the ties that once bound them? Days turned into weeks, and the weight of unspoken truths pressed heavier on both Eva and Tomas. The once familiar spaces between them were now charged with a tension so thick it seemed to suffocate the air. Eva moved through her days as though navigating a labyrinth of shadows, each step measured, each glance wary. The secret she had discovered, the revelation of the child and the hidden past, was no longer just a fact, it had become a specter haunting every memory, every quiet corner of her life. She felt the pulse of betrayal in her veins, a relentless drumbeat reminding her of everything that had been kept from her, everything she had believed to be certain now transformed into uncertainty. The fire of her anger burned fiercely, yet beneath it lay a brittle, fragile ache, the remnants of a love she was reluctant to abandon entirely. Tomas, on the other hand, grappled with an acute awareness of his own culpability. Each attempt at reaching out was weighed against the fear of further shattering what remained of their fragile bond. He had once imagined that love alone could smooth over the edges of deception, that time and quiet remorse could restore what had been lost. But now, confronted with the raw force of Eva's pain and the depth of her mistrust, he realized that no amount of pleading could substitute for the scars his secrets had inflicted. He was trapped in a relentless cycle of self-reproach, driven by the urgent desire to make amends and the terrifying knowledge that every action could either heal or irreparably wound the woman he loved. The world outside their private turmoil continued without pause, indifferent to the intimate chaos consuming them. Friends, family, and casual acquaintances offered their own judgments, consciously or not, their curiosity and opinions compounding the pressure each day. Eva felt their scrutiny like 1,000 invisible hands pressing down, reminding her that this was not just a private heartbreak. It was a story unfolding in the shadows of public perception, one she could neither fully control nor escape. The isolation, both chosen and imposed, amplified every emotion: anger, sorrow, confusion, and a lingering, stubborn attachment that refused to let go completely. In the end, Eva's decision became an act of both courage and self-preservation. She allowed herself the painful clarity of distance, the sharp relief of stepping back from the man she loved, from the life she had once imagined. Yet even in this separation, she did not entirely close the door. Her heart, wounded but aware, recognized the faint possibility of reconciliation, but only if honesty, transparency, and relentless effort could rebuild the trust that had been so ruthlessly fractured. Tomas, left to reckon with his mistakes, understood that redemption would demand more than words. It would require sustained, undeniable action, a willingness to face the consequences of the past while proving that the future could be different. As the days stretched on, both of them navigated the complex terrain of grief, anger, and cautious hope. The secret that had threatened to destroy them had indeed torn the fabric of their relationship, but it also revealed the depth of their vulnerabilities, the fragility of trust, and the strength required to confront the shadows of human imperfection. Their journey forward would be uncertain, marked by difficult choices and moments of profound reckoning, but in that uncertainty lay the potential for growth, for understanding, and perhaps, in time, for a love that could endure even in the wake of betrayal. In the silence that followed the storm, Eva and Tomas were left to confront themselves, to navigate the remnants of their shattered world, and to discover whether the fragments of trust, once broken, could ever be pieced together again.